Welcome back to the Talk Your Tail Off podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa, more commonly known as Girl with the Dogs. And for today's episode, we're going to be talking about some heartwarming stories that were write-ins from my audience about how pets either changed or saved their lives. But before we get started, I'd like to encourage you all to join this community by hitting that subscribe button. And if you're interested in the pet grooming products that I know and love, you can check out my website, girlwiththedogs.com, and use code TALKTAIL for 10% off your first order. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Before I talk about some of these stories, I just want to make sure that I put out a trigger warning. A lot of these stories discuss self-harm, suicide, or thoughts of suicide, as well as violent acts and pet loss. So the first story is from Barb, and I'm going to be reading these off of my laptop. Now, these are pet owners writing in, sending me emails about their stories. So some of them might be written not in the best way. I didn't have the ability to edit every single one of them to make them sound better. So if when I'm reading them, I'm kind of confused or, the sentence doesn't sound that great, that's probably why. So the first story is from Barb, and it reads, "Hey Vanessa, way before you were born, there was a train derailment in the Oakville area. I was attending the University of Guelph at the time, but I was home visiting my mother. My mother and I decided to evacuate to Guelph after we got the evacuation order. Of course, we took our 2 cats, Simon and Jethro." I hope I pronounced Jethro properly. "We only had cardboard box cat carriers as we didn't have time to prepare. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and we were driving in the pitch black northbound up Highway 6. Both cats were fine in their carriers the entire time. Suddenly, Jethro threw an absolute fit. Crying, meowing, clawing madly at his cage, he managed to claw his way out, so I pulled over. Just as I pulled over, I felt the whoosh of a car narrowly missing my driver's side door. The car had been traveling southbound in my northbound lane at a high rate of speed. If we hadn't pulled over, we all would have died. Thank you, Jethro." Thank you, Barb, for that story. It gave me chills the first time I read it. So for anybody who might have been confused by that email, basically a car was driving on the incorrect way on the highway. And had she continued driving, that car would have hit her dead on because it was so dark. And I don't believe Highway 6 is completely lit up at night. It would have been obviously quite the disaster. So the cat freaking out caused her to pull over, and in doing so, saved everybody's life. Whether that is a coincidence, I don't know. The next one is from Tabitha, and it starts with the title of "The Eulogy of a Well-Loved Dog." "Luna Lovegood came into our lives at a breaking point. 2 recent separations, the blending of 2 families, and much heartbreak all around at what we had and what might have been. After pulling our name on a waiting list, we received a call from our local SPCA. They said, 'We have a puppy here you might be interested in. She's between 6 and 9 months. Been kept in a kennel outside and is going to need a busy family to love her.' Well, they had me. We drove immediately to meet our girl. What they had declined to mention was that she was a 65-pound American Bulldog puppy, but we were in love. She wouldn't sit down for the first 12 hours until finally her legs gave way to the plush bed between her 2 moms. Later, all 95 pounds of her would curl up in any one of the 5 laps available to her and anyone who visited. She was the quintessential nanny lapdog. Like Molly Weasley's bewitched cuckoo clock at the burrow. I'm not sure what that is, but Luna knew where each child was at any given moment, when they slept, when they woke in the night, when they left every other week to go to their other home. Every 2 weeks, Luna would whine as the kids packed their overnight bags and paced the floor as they left. She would not sit or lay down until she found them. Ultimately, she would give in and sleep by the door, waiting. Luna Lovegood healed us. She covered us in love and in truthfully sharp fur when we needed her the most, patching our worn spots. She brought us together when I thought we would never find our groove as a family of 5. Even if that meant sitting in your lap to make sure you couldn't leave angry, sad, or lonely. Luna also became the big sister to 3 cats, 3 dogs, and a bunny throughout her life. She rose to the occasion, teaching each of them their place, which was anywhere but the human's laps. Those, of course, were reserved for her. She even saved the life of a little boy from drowning on Mother's Day when he wandered off from a neighbor's house and fell into a nearby creek. She also saved my life during a neurological event in my sleep, but mostly she saved our family. To our biggest baby and most beloved nanny, your watch has ended. Rest now, XOXO, the Cash family. Thank you, Tabitha. And for those who are listening and not watching, for some of these stories, I am showing photos of the pets in mention. That was a really good story, and in some way I can relate to that. When I was 18, my parents separated, and that was a very difficult time for our family, and that's when I got my German Shepherd, Zoe. Zoe ended up being a huge part of my family, a huge part of my healing and growing, and she taught me a lot about responsibility at such a young age, which inevitably paved the way for me to be a better pet owner in the future. Now, the next story that we have is from Penny, and it reads, "Hi. I saw a post today that you were asking people about their dog stories, and I hope this is the right email. Anyway, I have been wanting to tell you this story, just so you can share in my love for my Amelia. I volunteered for a number of years as the transport person for a small breed rescue. I loved it and learned a lot about puppy mill dogs and wounded souls. One day they called and said that they had a dog that had been found in a park and taken to the Humane Society in that area. They had trouble assessing the dog because she kept trying to bite them. So off I went, and when I got there, they brought out a 5-pound Yorkie who had no teeth, was debarked, typical of the puppy mills. She had mammary tumors, luxating patellas, and was basically a mess. They told me they had named her Amelia, and she was chipped, but it only went to the company that sold the chip. Puppy mills will chip the dogs that are good breeders, so that they can breed them until they can no longer breed, and then throw them away for coyote bait. She was 12 years old, according to the chip information. I wrapped her in a pink blanket, put her in my lap, and took her up to the rescue. I put her in one of the upper kennels so she wouldn't be too afraid of the other dogs. I went back every day and took her outside and gave her ice cream. Finally, I said that I just had to keep her. The lady who ran the rescue said that their vet checked her and she probably only had a few months to live because of the tumors. I said that if I took her, I would pay the senior fee and adopt her, so she would be ours officially. So I took her to our vet to get checked out, and she also said 4 to 5 months to live, and we took her home to get groomed because she became a part of our 3-dog pack. Because she couldn't bark, she kind of squeaked as she walked around the house and always found her food and her bed despite the chaos of being with the other dogs. A few weeks later, her lady part started to slip out because they were being pushed by the tumors. Our vet just told us to push them back in and wait. It wouldn't be long until she passes. Angry and wanting to do something that would make her comfortable, I took her to the WVRC, a specialty hospital near us. The oncologist was smitten at first sight of her. It was easy to fall in love with my Amelia. She took her back, did blood work and an ultrasound to map the tumors, then consulted with a surgeon. She came back out and said, "If I didn't know she had cancer, I would think she was a totally healthy dog." Her quality of life was great. She loved our other dogs and could interact with them, so we made the decision to do surgery and remove as many of the tumors as possible. She came out of the surgery raring to go, so we started chemotherapy. While she was getting chemo, I went in for an annual mammogram, and that's when I found out that I had breast cancer. I came home and hugged her tight and said, "Mama and you now have something in common." She was an inspiration. I had surgery and radiation, and we both finished our treatments at the same time. She was given a scarf that said, "I kicked cancer's tail," signed by the entire staff. That was a year after her surgery. Now comes the amazing part. I was contacted by the PR lady at WVRC, who told me that there was a nonprofit called Puppy Up. They basically did research comparing cancer drugs used in dogs for use in humans and vice versa. They wanted to have a walk to raise money for the research and needed a dog as a mascot. And the PR lady asked if I would consider letting them use Amelia. I said absolutely. Then she asked if I would be the human representative, as we both had breast cancer treatment at the same time. I'll let you guess what I said. So we did radio programs and TV spots for the Puppy Up Walk to be held in September. I was so happy to not only shine a light on how strong my little girl was, but to make aware the horrible puppy mill treatments that the government did not control properly, and still don't. These dogs live in terrible conditions and are not only physically abused, but mentally abused as well. They come to shelters terrified, and it takes so much time to gain their trust. But they deserve a good life as well, and those who adopt and don't shop are angels in disguise. Well, my little Amelia didn't make it to the walk. She started having seizures over Memorial Day weekend and died on the Tuesday after. My heart was in shambles, my soul shredded. But when the walk came to fruition, Amelia was with me in my backpack, and she remains with me always. A little 5-pound hero who, when given months to live, lived 2 years and 9 months. Thank you for listening to her story, and I would like to send you a picture, but I will do so in another email. I looked for that picture and I could not find another email that contained a photo of the dog, unfortunately. Good luck with your little Yorkie. What a cutie he is, and I hope for only wonderful days in the sunshine for him. Sincerely, Penny Hardy. Thank you, Penny, for that really adorable story. I am so happy to hear that you beat breast cancer and that your little dog beat breast cancer as well. It's amazing that she lived almost 3 years after they said that she would only live a few months. And I think there's probably a good reason why you ended up with her. It seems like you guys both needed each other at that time. And thank you for thinking of Ace. So Ace is my little Yorkie Maltese mix. He's actually really not doing well, unfortunately. He just continues to lose weight despite treatment. He was diagnosed with IBD. So I really don't know how much longer I have left with him. He still has a good quality of life. He's happy. He plays. He's a good dog, but I don't know how much longer he can live at the size that he is. So I appreciate the message about him. We're going to move on to the next story. And this story was written in by Michelle. Trigger warning, it does contain talks of suicide. The pet who has saved my life is named Diesel. He is a 10-year-old American bulldog. I originally got his mom and helped raise her with the guy that I was dating at the time. We broke up and he promised me the first pick of the first litter. He stuck with his promise, and something about his face in a pile of 8-week-old bulldog puppies stuck out to me. I knew he was the one once I was holding him and his mom looked between Diesel and I and then licked my face and walked away. It was like she approved and wanted me to know that. Fast forward a few years, I am a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps with PTSD. Diesel is my emotional support animal. I reached a very low point in my life with my mental health. My mind had broken. I left work with full intentions of ending my life that day. I was kneeling on my bedroom floor with a gun in my hand and crying. Diesel walked up to me and held eye contact while licking the tears off my face. The look in his eyes let me know he was not leaving my side, and he had this depth and sorrow I had never seen from him before. I knew I could not leave him. I put the gun down and called the VA, Veteran Affairs, to reach out for help for my mental health. He literally saved my life that day. The last 8 months have been very hard. He had 2 other sisters that have both had to be euthanized for various health reasons. The first one was a 14-year-old lab that I had raised since she was 7 weeks old. She had a tumor burst and caused massive hemorrhaging. We were unaware that the tumor existed until it was too late. I'm just going to stop the story here for a second and say that is unfortunately the same way that my German Shepherd died. So one morning, around maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to this sound. And when I woke up, I was a little bit kind of delusional because I was half asleep. And I looked over at her and I noticed that she was trying really hard with her front paws to get herself up off the ground. And that evening I had been playing ball with her outside. So it's not as though she had an injury. She really didn't have arthritis. She did not have hip problems. So it was unusual that she was unable to get herself up off the ground. When she finally did get up off the ground, she was extremely wobbly, moving from side to side. She couldn't keep her balance. I knew something was obviously very wrong. So I rushed her to the emergency clinic and we were told the same thing. They did an ultrasound. They couldn't see anything because there was a lot of blood in the way. They didn't know it was blood at the time. They just knew it was fluid. So they put in a needle and found that it was blood. And that was the situation. She had a tumor that we were unaware of that had burst and she was hemorrhaging. So I had no choice but to put her down. And the craziest part about that entire story is that that day I was leaving to go to Italy for 2 weeks. So had she not passed that day, she may have passed when I was in Italy, which would have been horrible because she was my first dog and I definitely wanted to be there. I want to be there for any of my dogs when I have to put them down, but specifically my first one for sure. And I'm just really grateful that she decided to go before that. It's like she kind of knew we were leaving and she thought, okay, well, you guys aren't leaving me, so I'm just going to make my exit now. But I understand this person's write-in and how much that sucks because it comes without any notice and your dog is completely fine up until the moment that it happens. So I will continue with the story. The second one was my 15-year-old husky, who I had raised since she was 8 weeks old. I came home from work one morning and she could no longer stand. It was my birthday and I had to put my second dog down in 7 months. Last Saturday, May 11th, I took Diesel to the vet and they found a massive tumor by his spleen. I had no idea how I was going to raise over $3,000 to have it removed. Whether it was cancer or not, it had to come out due to the size. The veterinarian stated if it burst, it would cause massive hemorrhaging and kill him. It was a repeat of my lab all over again, but this time I had a warning. Through my friends, I was able to raise quite a bit of money and made the payment plan for the rest. Diesel just had surgery today, May 17th. He made it through surgery and did well. The tumor turned out to be 5.5 pounds. He is still in recovery and hopefully I can bring him home tonight. Thank you, Michelle from South Carolina. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that write-in. I'm really sorry to hear about the troubles that you obviously have been through, but it's pretty amazing how dogs can truly change your life for a positive. I've heard way too many stories like this of people who, just didn't want to be here anymore, and because of their pets, they're still here. So again, thank you for writing that. I'm sure that was difficult to write in, but I really appreciate the story. The next story is from Christy. Our family went to adopt Cora from a local shelter. While there, my adult son fell in love with his sister Charlotte. So we came home with 2 4-month-old puppies. I am diabetic, and at the time, I was having a very difficult time with regulating my sugars. One night, I felt like I was in the deepest sleep I had ever experienced. I suddenly felt Charlotte trying to French kiss me, and then proceeded to jump on my chest until I came to. My blood sugar was at 44. This happened 3 times before she was 1 year old. She taught her sister, and now they both start by kissing the heck out of my face. I realize what's happening, and I address it before I drop below 50. They have more than paid for their adoption fees, and it led them being a bit spoiled. That's the end of that story. That was a short story. But it's also pretty amazing how dogs know what's going on with us medically before we do. And when you have a dog that's not even trained to do that and they go ahead and do it, it's fairly remarkable. Every time I hear one of those stories, I just can't believe how smart dogs are. And cats are similar. They'll do similar things as well. But you hear more about dogs than you do about cats. The next story is written in by Stephanie, and it reads, "This story is about my daughter Hannah, now age 9, and her companion Tink. Hannah is our 3rd child and the one who completed our family. She's incredibly smart, beautiful, and quirky. Around her 1st birthday, we started to notice some things that started to worry us about her. Things like not starting to talk, not liking being upside down or swinging, avoiding certain types of food, things that, unlike her siblings, were becoming more and more unusual. As age 2 slowly crept around the corner, her aversions to foods, movement, and speech seemed to only worsen. Through our attempts to widen her world and adjust to her needs, we discovered she loved checking the mail and opening letters. So we made it a big deal to have everyone we knew send her a card, or even their junk mail if they wanted, as she was always ecstatic to receive anything. With 2 rounding the corner and a couple of big milestones happened, we started to use some sign language, which was huge, and we started OT, food therapy and speech therapy. Hannah was still struggling as her 2nd birthday hit. Therapies weren't going as well as we hoped, and even with certain milestones getting nearer and nearer, we sat back sliding and regressing. It wasn't until a couple of months into her OT that her therapist mentioned that a friend of hers had a litter of golden retrievers and were hoping to donate them to families who could utilize them as service animals. We were desperate to try anything that could help Hannah. You could slowly see her crawling back into her shell, which was devastating. So we made the decision, all well knowing our application could be denied, and reached out to therapist's friend. With a little bit of luck and some pixie dust, we got a call one day from a wonderful woman who helped to change our daughters and our lives. As she wishes to remain anonymous, I will go with Susan. After a brief introduction to each other and explaining more of Hannah's story, she invited us to come meet the puppies and see if we would bond with one of them. At this point, Hannah was terrified of dogs. I think it may have been unpredictability and sudden movements they made. However, we were determined to exhaust every outlet, so we agreed on a date and hoped for the best. The day came to meet the puppies. With Hannah clung to me, I gently entered Susan's home and carefully sat down next to the most adorable pile of fluff you could ever find. Immediately, Hannah began to panic. Hands to her ears, screams of terror ensued, and I immediately stood up and sat with her well away from all the puppy breath and kisses. I was devastated for her. This was another loss in her growth. How was I going to help her overcome all of this? However, I didn't know what was about to happen, and if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have believed it myself. I looked down at my feet as I felt something pawing at my leg. To my astonishment, I found a rather tiny ball of fluff very gently trying to get my attention. She was absolutely tiny. Come to find out, she was the last puppy born in the litter and the runt. The puppy sat very patiently at my feet. At only 6 weeks old, I would have thought her behavior was that of a well-trained elderly dog. I very slowly lowered Hannah to the ground, expecting sudden panic and fear to overtake her. Hannah crawled over to the closest corner she could find and stared at the puppy with bewilderment. The puppy turned her attention to Hannah. She began to approach Hannah, to which Hannah started to curl up into a ball. The puppy stopped and laid down, waiting for Hannah to uncurl. Once she noticed Hannah was being more receptive, she slowly crept to her feet, to which she gently curled up next to Hannah and fell asleep. For the first time in the longest time, I watched as my daughter overcame a fear and reached over ever so gently, touching the puppy. The puppy didn't flinch. She remained still as Hannah curled up next to her and laid her head down. Susan and my eyes met, and we knew instantly this tiny runt of the litter would come home once she was ready to leave her mom. The time came to bring Puppy home. Prior, we had made a big deal about Hannah picking everything out for the puppy. We landed on the name Tink, as not only are we big Disney fans, but our last name is Hook. Instantly, upon her arrival to our home, Hannah, with enthusiasm, would bring her toys, help feed her, and started bonding with her. It was a week into Tink being home with us as we noticed that Hannah was trying to copy Tink's movements of rolling over and play bowing. This is a child who would scream bloody murder if her head went below her butt or if she was rolled over. She started feeding Tink and then herself. And then it came, dog. She said her first solid word, not mom or dad or even no. It was dog. Our therapist began working Tink into every therapy. And Hannah very quickly started packing on the vocabulary. Dog go bed, My dog go to bed. Hannah is 9 now, and Tink is going to be 8. They still cuddle together. She still follows her around. Hannah is now a straight A student who, for the life of us, we can't get to stop talking. She's caught up with her peers and adventurous. I still catch her having talks with Tink, who patiently listens and occasionally puts her 2 cents in with a bark. Tink is gray-faced now and has some arthritis, but she follows her humans around anywhere. Through my own struggles with severe PTSD and depression, she has shared beyond years of doggy wisdom and love through her kind soul. Tink made our family whole in so many ways, and she gave Hannah a voice. Thank you for reading, and I hope that you have the greatest day ever. I don't know why I'm crying. I'm tearing up. Thank you, Stephanie Hook, for writing that in. That was a really, really sweet story. And again, not the only story that I've heard before of people or children who overcome certain obstacles, even if it's just stress and anxiety, being out in public or socializing, knowing they have a service animal there of some kind, even if it's a emotional support dog, goes a long way. So I really appreciate that, because I think that write-in will really change the minds of a lot of people who might be struggling with the same things with their kids and decide that maybe getting a dog would be beneficial, or even a cat. The next story is short, and it's been written in by Jackie, and it reads, "Hello, I am a big fan. Trigger warning, this talks about self-harm and suicidal ideation. In 2008, I was placed on an antidepressant that, mixed with my undiagnosed bipolar disorder, made me extremely suicidal. Some of these effects made me somewhat black out, where I was basically on autopilot and not really making any lucid choices. During one of these episodes, I swallowed an entire bottle of pills in an attempt at suicide. This was something like at 2 or 3 in the morning. My dog, Nixon, was an older Australian shepherd that our family had rescued from an abusive situation. I was still living at home, I was 22 at the time, and Nixon slept with my mom. That night, I guess he sensed something was wrong and kept barking and nosing at my mom until she got up and followed him into my room. That's where she found me unresponsive. She was able to get me to the hospital in time for them to pump my stomach and feed me charcoal. I woke up in the hospital not knowing what happened, and my mom told me how Nixon saved me. He is the reason I am not only still here today, but the reason I got my bipolar diagnosis that led to my successful medication management. That successful medication management led me to a bachelor's degree, and now almost a master's degree. Nixon was my guardian angel, and I miss him every day. Thanks for listening, Jackie Blackstone." Can we all just be in an agreement that dogs are simply amazing? Like that story. That story reminds me of something else, even though it's not my dog having the intuition to save something, but I don't know why it reminded me of this. But when I first got Zoe, I had her for about a year. She was a year old. As I said, my parents were going through a separation, so our family home was for sale. And because of that, my mom was getting really stressed out about dog hair being all over the house all the time, because whenever there was a showing, she would have to rush and clean the house. And we lived in about a 3,600 square foot home, so it was a huge house to clean on the fly. So she had said to me she no longer wanted my shepherd living in the house while we were trying to sell it. And then once we bought the next house, she could obviously come back in the house. So she was subject to living in the garage for a little bit. And one day, I was sitting at the dinner table, and I was eating dinner with my family, and I just had this thought that I needed to go check on her. I don't know why. So I got up and I went to go check on her, and lo and behold, I found her laying on the ground with a bag over her head, and she was having a very difficult time breathing. You could tell the bag was like filling up with air and decompressing, and she was taking some really big, deep breaths. So I ran over and I pulled the bag off of her head, and her eyes were just almost bulging out of her head. And she, took a few breaths and then came to and got up. And I realized, had I not gone into the garage at that exact moment, I would have walked into the garage to a dead dog. So again, it's just kind of that intuition of knowing something's wrong and not really knowing why. But Nixon certainly did that for his owner. We are going to read the next story, which is fairly long, and it is from Sue. In 2018, my son's girlfriend, Heather, really wanted a Labradoodle. Troy wasn't anxious to get a dog, but went along with it because he knew it would make her happy, and he liked dogs. Heather found a 1.5 to 2-year-old female Labradoodle on Marketplace for $400. They drove about an hour to take a look at her. The photo that was shown in the ad showed a beautiful dog. This photo later turned out to be the first photo that shows up when you Google Labradoodle. When they arrived, they first spoke to the woman trying to sell her. As the story goes, this woman's brother and his wife were divorcing, and he asked his sister to take Maya. Maya and her German Shepherd did not get along, so she put Maya in an unheated trailer at the back of the property in February. There was a bowl at the corner of the trailer where the water dripped into cigarette butts all over the ground. Maya was so scared that she wouldn't let them near her. She looked nothing like the ad photo. Her hair was so long that she couldn't see at all. The hair between her legs was matted together, making it difficult for her to walk. They left that day because they couldn't see taking a dog that they couldn't even get near. That night, they thought it over and decided that they would go back the next day just to get her out of that bad situation. When they picked her up, they took her straight to the groomer and then to the vet. They brought her home and told her to sit. She sat. Roll over. She rolled over. They struck gold with her. Someone must have cared about her and trained her at one point. Maya loved going on bike rides, camping trips, boat rides, any adventure. We all loved her so much. She couldn't have been a better dog for them. Unfortunately, in September 2020, Heather was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I could go on for hours about how wonderful she was. She was my other daughter. She had an extremely difficult upbringing, and this little blonde beauty put herself through school and became a nurse at a nursing home. Maya was always with her during her recovery time between treatments. Heather would read on the couch, and Maya would be right by her side. She provided so much comfort to all of us during that time. Heather died on April 9th, 2021. We were all devastated. Continuing to live in their home was too emotionally difficult for Troy, so he and Maya temporarily moved back home. I knew that it was only a matter of time before he would decide to go out west. He had always loved it there. I was very much grieving during his year with us. Maya was my comfort dog. I was so thankful for her that when Troy announced that he was leaving, he said that he would take her, but he knew that I needed her more. I was thankful. I've had several health concerns, and Maya certainly helped me get through these difficult times. Last fall, I signed up Maya to be tested as a therapy dog for St. John Ambulance Therapy Dogs. She went through the testing and passed with flying colors. I am so proud of her. Now we go weekly to a local retirement home so that she can spread her sweet presence to others. We have gone to the local hospital with a group of other therapy dogs to greet the employees during their lunch break. They really love the positive energy and calming effect that dogs give off. I'm sure that by this point, this is so funny, you wish you hadn't included the word detailed in your request. No, that is not true. I'm very happy for these detailed responses. I am just so happy to talk about how much this rescue doggie has helped so many people in her 6 years that she belonged in our family. Thank you for allowing me to tell you about our lovely Maya, Sue Haskins. Thank you, Sue, for that story. I read that story earlier and bawled my eyes out. I am very, very sorry for yours and your family's loss. That is horrible. Again, for those who are listening and not watching the YouTube channel, there are some photos of Heather and, of course, Maya. If you are interested in seeing what either one of them look like, be sure to listen to this podcast on YouTube. The next story is from Mary. We had a beautiful white shepherd, Seus, who was very smart. He sired a litter to the neighbor's lab, and we adopted one of the pups and called him Junior. Junior was your typical pup, got into everything, and could be very destructive. But he was my baby, and I loved him unconditionally. We lived in a 1-bedroom cottage in Wasaga Beach. This cottage was heated by a wood stove that had to be stoked all night in the winter to keep it warm. We had stacks of wood in the living room near the stove. The stove sat on a large stone hearth. One night, my husband went into work nights, and I had stoked the fire before I went to bed. During the night, one of the logs was either knocked off the pile or rolled off. I think by the way that it landed, leaning on the side of the stove, it was knocked by one of the dogs. Thankfully, it was still on the stone hearth. The stove was so hot, the wood started smoldering. The cottage quickly filled up with smoke. Smoke will rise to the ceiling and works its way down to the floor. Because I was sleeping, a lot of the smoke accumulated before I would have noticed it. Seamus kept nudging me, and Junior jumped on the bed whining. I thought he had to go outside to do his business. Irritated, I sat up in bed to let him out and started choking. Both dogs grabbed my clothing and dragged me towards the front door. We all got out safely, and fortunately, the wood did not flame, or the whole cottage would have been sent into inferno in minutes. When most of the smoke cleared, I went back in and carefully took the smoldering log outside in the snow. I never hugged my boys so tight. They both saved my life that night. The best boys ever. Very cute story, and thankfully had a great, happy ending. The next story was written by Stephanie. It was the beginning of 2000, and my husband had temporarily taken a job in another state, leaving me to care for myself and 2 dogs. At the time, my diabetes was severely out of control, requiring me to take a significant amount of medication to control the disease. Unbeknownst to me, I was having severe sugar lows in the middle of the night. My chow chow, Cinnamon, had taken to sleeping on my husband's pillow every night, presumably because she missed him. Little did I know it was because she would watch me sleep. Not long after my husband took his job, Cinnamon woke me up out of a dead sleep, only for me to discover I was indeed having a very severe sugar low. She whined, pawed, and barked at me until I woke up. I dragged myself out of bed and crawled to the kitchen where I could get the life-saving sugar to raise my levels. Several times on the way to the kitchen, I passed out. Cinnamon bit me, lightly, on the shoulder and on the foot to wake me up. She braced me as I struggled to stand up and didn't leave my side until my sugar stabilized. If Cinnamon had not been there watching me and waking me up, I would have fallen into a coma, and because no one else was there, I would have surely died. Cinnamon was never trained to sense my sugar lows, but she knew instinctively what to do. She was a very special little dog, and to this day, I believe there will never be another dog like her. Once again, we have another story of a dog who saved their owner's life that had diabetes. They can obviously smell when the sugar is dropping, or they can smell or sense that something is wrong with their human. But again, very incredible. The next story was sent in by Alex. Hi, Vanessa. You asked for the story, and I will tell you mine. I live in the north of Germany, and until August of last year, I shared my life with my husband. He is a paramedic, and our beloved dog, Floyd. Floyd passed away last year at an unknown age after 12 years of living with us. I cannot pronounce this breed name properly, I don't think, but I will put it in the description because I've never heard of this before. He was a Cad de Bestaire, and we got him from the local shelter. I don't remember the year. The day was the 24th of December. My husband had to work that day, and we all, including Floyd, were invited to my mother-in-law's for Christmas dinner in the evening. So around 2:00 p.m., I took Floyd for a walk in the forest. As it started to get dark, which was around 5:00 p.m., at that time of the year, I took out my mobile phone with GPS to get a look where we were and how to get back to the car. I figured out that the same way back would be too long to get back in time before it got dark. One moment, I stopped to check the GPS, wondering where the water around my rubber boots was coming from. And that's when I realized I went into the swamp. We went on, cautious, when suddenly a puddle appeared in front of us. It seemed to not be so big. Floyd went through with no problem, and the water reached a little over his paws. I took one step and splash. I got stuck in the swamp. I was up to my hip, and I couldn't get the hell out of there. It was getting dark very fast, and that water was cold. Everything I grabbed to pull myself out, like grass or branches, had no hold. It was all loose. My feet could not find any solid ground. I started to panic a little bit. I knew nobody would know where I was. So I shouted in desperate and pleading voice for my dog, Floyd, please pull. That moment I knew I never trained that word pull to him. To my surprise, Floyd understood. With the full force of his 30 kilograms, he put all into that harness he was wearing. His claws digged in the soft ground, and he managed to give me a bit of the hold that I needed to get my body out of the swampy mud hole. What a relief. But I was happy just for a moment. When I had my breath back, I realized that I had lost the orientation because of me panicking. And now it had become pitch black. All was darkness. I took out my smartphone with the GPS out of my jacket pocket. It had been underwater, so I expected it to not work, but fortunately it did. And it had very low battery. I decided to try to phone my husband. He was at work. I could see that he picked up my phone call, but I could not hear him. I wasn't sure if he could hear me. I yelled in the phone where I was and in what situation I was in, with just a little hope that he could understand. The last eon on that battery allowed me a last view of the GPS, and then that phone went out. I took the leash and tried to move in the direction I thought could be the right one. I had fear that I might fall into the swamp hole again. Floyd was on my side, calm, steady, and then I fell. Luckily, not again in the swamp, but over some wood on the ground. I hit my knee and my hand hard. The pain was like a flash, and I started crying. For pain, for despair, for cold, for bringing my dog into this situation, for my stupidity, and everything. And again, my dog Floyd was the one with the mood of the rock. But Floyd licked my face and hit me with his front paw like he was saying, "Hey, it's not that bad, let's go." I was not sure. Darkness, the possibility of falling again, pain, and on the other hand, getting lost and searched for in the forest would be big enough to be in the local newspaper. I really didn't want to be part of the newspaper. And while I was thinking what would be the best thing to do, I heard that sound. The alert sound of an ambulance, just short but strong and near. I knew that it must have been my husband. He did understand what I said on the phone after all. And now he's using the alert that I know so well to help guide me. Floyd also knew the sound of an ambulance very well. So immediately he started to pull me. When we got out of the thick forest, we reached a path, and the alarm sound was hearable again and again. Every minute came a sign, and then I could see blue flashing lights. I was saved. Floyd and I reached my car and the ambulance, and my husband and his workmates a minute later, and of course, they made fun of me a little bit. Floyd and I rushed home, and my husband back to his shift. The dog and I had showered together, and we ended up meeting my mother-in-law just in time for Christmas dinner. We told the story weeks later because we realized that evening that the end could have easily not ended so well. That evening, my beloved Floyd saved my life. He was my best friend. Farewell, Floyd. We will meet again. Thank you so much, Alex, for writing that in. I will say that while it was not written very clearly, so it may have been difficult for me to read it, it was still a great story. So thank you. There are plenty of more stories that have been written in, and if you have a story, I would love to hear it. You can send your story to girlwiththedogs@outlook.com, and please put the subject line pet story so that I know what the email is about. I will save it in a folder, and at some point it could be read on this podcast. But that's it, everyone, for today's episode. We are now at the hour mark, so it's time to wrap up. Tune in next week for an educational episode where I speak to a veterinarian who specializes in nutrition, and she's going to answer a very controversial question. Is kibble bad for my pet? Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Talk Your Tail Off.